I'm Samantha Mitchell, 32, and that Thursday morning changed everything. As I prepared for my critical thyroid screening, Kyle, my 7-year-old brother, barged into my apartment. "Cancel your doctor's appointment. Take me to my game. The scouts are coming." When I refused, reminding him I'd scheduled this weeks ago, his face darkened. "You'll regret choosing yourself over family," he spat, storming out. 20 minutes later, I discovered my car's slashed tires and shattered windshield. Before I dive into what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever had to choose between your needs and someone else's demands. Family drama gets messy, and my story? It's about to show you just how toxic blood ties can become. I stared at my vandalized car in disbelief. The slashed tires and cracked windshield weren't just property damage, they represented something far more sinister brewing in my family. Still, I had to get to my appointment. I called a rideshare, already knowing I'd be late. "I'm sorry, Miss Mitchell," the receptionist said when I finally arrived, breathless and stressed. "You missed your slot. The doctor's completely booked today. The earliest I can reschedule is next month." My heart sank. I'd waited 6 weeks for this appointment, a critical screening for the same thyroid condition that had taken my grandmother's life. As I rescheduled, my phone buzzed with my mother's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant one thing was always clear. Kyle came first. From the moment he showed athletic promise in elementary school, our parents, Patricia and Richard Mitchell, structured our entire family life around his sports schedule. My academic achievements were footnotes compared to Kyle's game statistics. "Samantha, your brother has a real shot at something special," Dad would say. Whenever I mentioned needing something rides to debate club, money for science camp, or even just their presence at my high school graduation. Mom was no better. "Kyle needs proper nutrition for peak performance," she'd explain while preparing elaborate meals for him while I made my own sandwiches. When Kyle needed new sports equipment, it appeared immediately. When I needed a laptop for college applications, I worked extra shifts at the grocery store. The pattern continued into our adulthood. Kyle, despite being 27, still lived rent-free with our parents, who funded his training schedule while he pursued his elusive athletic career. Meanwhile, I put myself through nursing school, built my career, and became financially independent, all while caring for our grandmother in her final years. Grandmother Margaret was the only one who saw me. She suffered from the same thyroid condition I was now showing symptoms of, the condition that had gone undiagnosed until too late because her husband, like my parents, dismissed her health concerns as dramatic. Before she died, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't let them dim your light, Samantha." I was thinking about her words when my phone rang again, Mom, for the 3rd time. "Samantha Elizabeth Mitchell, what were you thinking?" Her voice cut through the speaker the moment I answered. "Kyle missed his warm-up because you wouldn't drive him. Mom, I had a medical appointment. He had to take an Uber to his game. Do you know how that looks to his coach? To the scouts? My car was vandalized, Mom. Someone slashed my tires and broke my windshield this morning." There was a pause on the line. "Well, that's terrible, but what does that have to do with not driving your brother?" The disconnection in her response stunned me. It happened right after Kyle threatened me for not canceling my appointment. "Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed. "Kyle would never do something like that. It was probably those troublemakers from the apartment complex. You really should move to a safer neighborhood." That evening, I received a group text from Mom. "Family dinner tomorrow, 6 p.m. sharp. Important discussion about family support." When I arrived at my parents' suburban home, the tension was palpable. Kyle sat smugly at the dining table, our father's hand resting proudly on his shoulder. Mom bustled around, serving Kyle's favorite meal. "There she is," Dad said, his tone carrying a slight edge. "The independent daughter who's too busy for family. I had a medical appointment." I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "We all have appointments, Sam," Kyle interjected, using the nickname I'd repeatedly asked him not to use. But some things are more important. Those scouts were from the semi-pro league. And you couldn't drive yourself because? My car's in the shop, you know that. Mom placed a heaping plate in front of Kyle. Your brother is at a critical juncture in his career. We all need to make sacrifices. My health isn't a sacrifice I'm willing to make, I said quietly. Dad cleared his throat. About your car situation. Kyle told us what happened. I looked directly at my brother. Did he? Kyle met my gaze steadily. I told them how those kids from your apartment complex have been causing trouble. Remember how they were hanging around the parking lot when I visited last week? I warned you about them. The blatant lie hung in the air. Kyle had never mentioned any kids, because there weren't any. My apartment complex housed mostly nurses and medical residents from the nearby hospital. That's not what happened, I said. Mom sighed dramatically. Samantha, we're not here to argue about who vandalized your car. We're here to discuss how we move forward as a supportive family. Supportive apparently meant one thing. I would be responsible for driving Kyle to his games until his car was fixed, whenever that would be. When I tried to explain my work schedule and ongoing medical concerns, Dad waved his hand dismissively. We all have problems, Samantha. Kyle has a shot at something real here. Your job will always be there, and whatever health thing you're worried about can wait a few weeks. As I drove home that night, I realized something had shifted. My brother's first betrayal, the vandalism, and subsequent lie had crossed a line I didn't know existed in our family dynamic. What I didn't realize then was that it was only the beginning. 2 weeks after the family dinner, I was in the middle of my shift at Memorial Hospital when the room started spinning. As a registered nurse in the cardiac unit, I knew the warning signs my body was sending, but I pushed through, checking IV lines and updating patient charts. Sam, you look terrible, Jessica Kim, my closest colleague and friend of 7 years, grabbed my arm as I steadied myself against the nurse's station. You're pale as a ghost. I'm fine, I insisted. But even as the words left my mouth, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. My hands trembled as I tried to document a patient's vitals. No, you're not, Jessica said firmly. Your hands are shaking, and I can see the sweat on your forehead. How long have you been feeling like this? It started yesterday, I admitted reluctantly. Just some fatigue and heart palpitations, probably just stress. Jessica's expression shifted from concern to alarm when I mentioned heart palpitations. Without another word, she guided me to an empty exam room and took my vitals. My heart rate was dangerously elevated, my blood pressure fluctuating wildly. This isn't stress, Sam. You need to be seen right now. Within an hour, I found myself as a patient in my own hospital with Dr. Patel, an endocrinologist, examining the results of my blood work and emergency scans. Thyrotoxicosis, he explained gravely. Your thyroid is severely overactive, which is causing your heart rate irregularities. The blood tests show dangerously elevated hormone levels. Why didn't you come in sooner? I thought about my canceled appointment, the rescheduling delays, the additional week I'd spent driving Kyle to his games, instead of focusing on my health. It's complicated, I said finally. Dr. Patel didn't press the issue. We need to start treatment immediately. The condition has advanced significantly and is putting dangerous strain on your heart. I'm admitting you now. As the hospital staff, my coworkers, prepared a room for me, I reached for my phone. Despite everything, my first instinct was to call my family. Mom's phone went straight to voicemail. Same with Dad's. I hesitated before calling Kyle, but given the seriousness of the situation, I pushed aside my resentment and dialed his number. After several rings, he picked up. What is it, Sam? I'm kind of in the middle of something. Kyle, I'm in the hospital, I said, my voice shakier than I intended. It's my thyroid. They're admitting me. There was a pause, and I could hear cheering in the background. Today? Seriously? The championship game is in 2 hours, and I need a ride. My car's still not ready. The selfishness of his response shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it still did. Did you hear what I said? I'm being admitted to the hospital. Yeah, for your thyroid thing. But it's not like life or death, right? Can't you just explain the situation and come back later? This game is really important, Sam. There are scouts from the National League coming. I closed my eyes, suddenly too exhausted to argue. I can't drive you, Kyle. I'm literally being hooked up to cardiac monitors right now. He sighed heavily. Fine, whatever. I'll figure something out. Good luck with your situation. The call ended, and I stared at the phone in disbelief. As the nurses connected me to the monitoring equipment, I sent a group text to my parents and Kyle, admitted to Memorial Hospital. Serious thyroid condition affecting my heart. Room 412 if anyone wants to visit. No response came. Hours passed. Dr. Patel returned with more test results and a treatment plan that included medication to suppress my thyroid function and potentially surgery in the near future. Without intervention, this condition could lead to thyroid storm, he explained seriously. That's a life-threatening emergency that can cause heart failure, among other complications. The fact that you have a family history makes this even more concerning. As he spoke, my phone remained silent. No calls, no texts. Just as Dr. Patel was finishing his explanation, Bethany Walsh, my friend from college, appeared in the doorway with a small duffel bag. Jessica called me, she explained, setting the bag down. I brought some essentials from your apartment. Her eyes scanned the empty room. Where's your family? I forced a smile. Busy, I guess. Bethany's expression hardened. At Kyle's championship game, you mean? I passed the community sports complex on my way here. Your parents' car is in the parking lot. The revelation that my family knew about my hospitalization but chose Kyle's game instead was the second betrayal. It shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. It was entirely in character for them, but something about lying in a hospital bed, facing a potentially life-threatening condition, while they cheered from the bleachers broke something inside me. The next morning, when the time came for discharge, it was Bethany who helped me collect my prescriptions and paperwork, Bethany who drove me home, and Bethany who stocked my refrigerator with easy-to-prepare meals for the days ahead. You should stay with someone, she insisted, as she arranged my medications on the kitchen counter. The doctor said you shouldn't be alone right now. I'll be fine, I assured her, though we both knew it wasn't true. I've got my phone and neighbors nearby, and you're just a call away, right? What I didn't say was that I couldn't bear the thought of asking for help again, not after my family's response. As Bethany reluctantly left, promising to check in regularly, I curled up on my couch, surrounded by pill bottles and follow-up appointment cards, and finally allowed myself to cry. The day after my hospital discharge, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I'd been dozing on the couch, still weak from the medication adjustments, when the insistent chiming pulled me from sleep. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway. Kyle slouched behind them. There you are, Mom said when I opened the door, as if I'd been the one who was unreachable. She brushed past me into the apartment, Dad and Kyle following. We've been worried sick. I closed the door slowly, gathering my strength for whatever this visit entailed. You could have called, or answered my calls. We were preoccupied, Dad said, settling into my armchair without invitation. Kyle's game went into overtime. He scored the winning point. Shot, Kyle corrected. The winning shot. Right, I said flatly. Congratulations. Mom busied herself inspecting my kitchen, frowning at the meal containers Bethany had prepared. What's all this? Pre-made food? That's not going to help you get better. Bethany brought those, I explained, lowering myself carefully onto the couch. She picked me up from the hospital. A flash of something guilt, perhaps, crossed Mom's face, quickly replaced by defensiveness. We would have come if we'd known it was serious. I texted that I was being admitted for a serious condition. How much more explicit should I have been? Dad cleared his throat. Let's not get sidetracked. We're here now to discuss your health situation and how it impacts the family. The phrasing was so typical that I almost laughed. Not how the family could support me through a health crisis, but how my illness would inconvenience them. I've been diagnosed with severe hyperthyroidism, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. It's already affected my heart function. I need medication, possibly surgery, and definitely rest and reduced stress. Mom waved her hand dismissively. Your grandmother was always going on about her thyroid too. She lived to 78. She died of complications from untreated thyroid disease, I corrected. And she might have lived longer with proper care. Everyone has health issues, Sam, Kyle interjected. Last year, I sprained my ankle so badly they thought it was broken. I was back on the court in 2 weeks. The comparison between a sprained ankle and a condition that was literally causing my heart to malfunction left me momentarily speechless. Dad leaned forward. The timing of all this is just convenient, isn't it? Right when Kyle's career is finally taking off. Convenient? I repeated, disbelief coloring my voice. You think I engineered a medical emergency for attention? Not intentionally, he backpedaled slightly. But stress can manifest in physical ways. Maybe you're feeling overshadowed by Kyle's success? Before I could respond to this outrageous suggestion, Kyle spoke up. I checked, about your condition. What do you mean you checked? I have a friend who works in medical records at Memorial, Kyle said, looking smug. She looked up your file. Your levels aren't even that bad. The doctor's note said, moderate to severe, not critical. The violation hit me like a physical blow. You accessed my private medical records? That's illegal, Kyle shrugged. Family has a right to know, especially when you're using it as an excuse. An excuse for what? For bailing on your commitments, he said, as if it were obvious. Like driving me to games. I turned to my parents, expecting them to share my outrage at this invasion of privacy. Instead, Mom was nodding along with Kyle's explanation. We're just concerned that you might be exaggerating a bit, she said gently. You've always been sensitive, Samantha. The third betrayal, Kyle illegally accessing my medical information and my parents condoning it, was almost too much to process. But there was more to come. By the way, Kyle added, I hope you don't mind, but I've been staying in your guest room when you were in the hospital. My apartment's being fumigated. I stared at him. You've been staying in my apartment without permission? How did you even get in? I have your spare key, remember? From when you asked me to water your plants last year. You were supposed to return that key. Mom interjected. Don't be so territorial, Samantha. It's just a room, and he's your brother. Family helps family. As I looked around at the three of them, Mom defensive, Dad dismissive, Kyle entitled, something shifted inside me. The pattern of our family dynamic, previously accepted as normal despite its dysfunction, suddenly appeared in stark clarity. I need you all to leave, I said quietly. What? Mom looked genuinely surprised. I want you to leave my apartment. Now. Dad stood up, his expression darkening. This is how you treat us after we come to check on you? Check on me? I repeated. You ignored my hospitalization, accused me of exaggerating a serious medical condition, defended Kyle for illegally accessing my medical records, and justified him breaking into my apartment. You're not checking on me. You're invading what little space I have left. You're overreacting, Kyle said, rolling his eyes. No, I'm finally reacting, I countered. And I want all of you out. Kyle, leave your key on the table. They left reluctantly. Mom insisting they were just trying to help, Dad muttering about ingratitude, Kyle sulking like a scolded teenager rather than a grown man. When the door closed behind them, I changed the locks that same day, despite the effort it cost in my weakened state. It was the first time I'd ever stood up to my entire family at once, and though exhaustion soon overwhelmed me, I felt something else too, a glimmer of strength I hadn't known I possessed. 3 weeks after changing my locks, I returned to Memorial Hospital on light duty. Dr. Patel had cleared me for administrative work, only no direct patient care until my medication stabilized my condition. It wasn't ideal, but I needed the income and, frankly, the distraction from my deteriorating family situation. Welcome back, stranger. Jessica greeted me with a gentle hug as I settled at the nurse's station computer. How are you feeling? Better, I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. The medication was helping, though the side effects fatigue, nausea, and mood swings were challenging. Glad to be doing something productive again. Jessica nodded sympathetically. Just take it easy. We're all watching out for you. The morning passed uneventfully as I caught up on paperwork and updated electronic records. Around lunchtime, I headed to my locker to retrieve my medication. I needed to take it with food at precise intervals throughout the day. When I opened the locker, I immediately knew something was wrong. My things were slightly rearranged, and when I reached for my prescription bottle, it wasn't there. Looking for something? Lisa Hernandez, the nursing supervisor, appeared beside me, her expression uncharacteristically stern. My medication, I explained, still searching through my bag. It should be right here. I know I brought it. Come with me, please, Lisa said, her tone formal. To my office. Confused and increasingly concerned, I followed her. Inside her office, the hospital's security director, Mark Wilson, and the chief pharmacist, Dr. Reeves, were waiting. What's going on? I asked, a sense of dread building. Lisa folded her hands on her desk. Samantha, we've had reports of prescription medication going missing from the hospital pharmacy, specifically thyroid medication. And you think I took it? The accusation was so unexpected that I almost laughed. I have a legitimate prescription. My medication is missing from my locker. We're not accusing you of anything yet, Mark clarified. But there are concerns. Your access badge was used in the pharmacy department after hours last week when you were still on medical leave. That's impossible, I said. I've been home recovering. My badge is always with me. Dr. Reeves spoke up. We have the electronic logs, Samantha. Your badge accessed the pharmacy at 11:42 p.m. last Thursday, and the inventory check the next morning showed discrepancies. My mind raced. Last Thursday night I'd been at home, barely able to stay awake past 9 p.m. due to the medication's side effects. There was no way I could have been at the hospital. Someone else used my badge, I said finally. It wasn't me. Do you share your badge with anyone? Mark asked. Of course not. That's against protocol, and you know it. Lisa sighed. There's more. We've received an anonymous complaint about potential substance abuse issues, given your recent medical leave and now these missing medications. This is insane, I interrupted, anger cutting through my confusion. I've worked here for 7 years without a single issue. I'm on medical leave for a documented condition, and suddenly I'm being accused of stealing medication and abusing substances? Jessica, who had been silently observing, spoke up. Lisa, this doesn't make sense. Sam is one of our most reliable nurses. There must be another explanation. I hope so, Lisa replied, but we have to investigate. In the meantime, Samantha, you're suspended pending the outcome. I left the hospital in shock, my hospital badge confiscated, my locker contents in a sealed plastic bag, minus my missing medication. As I sat in my car, trying to process what had happened, my phone rang. It was Jessica. Don't panic, she said immediately. I think I know what happened. Remember when you mentioned your brother accessed your medical records through a friend here? I started asking around. Turns out his ex-girlfriend works in records, Melissa Grant. She was on duty in the pharmacy area last Thursday night. You think Kyle used her to access the pharmacy? I think it's worth checking. The security cameras might show something. Over the next few days, Jessica became my inside investigator while I waited anxiously at home. On Friday afternoon, she called with news. You need to come in and see this, she said. I convinced Mark to review the security footage. He wants you here when he does. An hour later, I was sitting in the security office with Mark, Lisa, and Jessica, watching footage from the previous Thursday night. The timestamp showed 11:38 p.m. when a figure in a hoodie approached the pharmacy department door. The person kept their head down, but when they reached for the badge reader, the camera caught a clear profile. That's not you, Mark said, pausing the video on the frame. But that's definitely your badge. I stared at the screen, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. That's my brother, Kyle. Mark resumed the footage, which showed Kyle using my badge to enter the pharmacy, spending several minutes inside, then leaving with something tucked into his hoodie pocket. How did he get your badge? Lisa asked. He had a key to my apartment, I explained. He must have taken it when I was hospitalized. The fourth betrayal, Kyle, using my badge to steal medication, potentially sabotaging my career, was the most calculated yet. When I tried calling him, he predictably denied everything despite the clear video evidence. That could be anyone, he insisted. And why would I steal your meds? I don't need that stuff. Then why were you there, Kyle? The camera clearly shows your face. It's a misunderstanding. Besides, if you just helped me when I needed it, none of this would be happening. Before I could respond to this twisted logic, my phone beeped with another call, the hospital's main line. I switched over to find it was Mark Wilson again. Samantha, I'm calling to let you know that your parents just contacted the hospital administration, he said, his voice carefully neutral. They're demanding we drop the investigation into the pharmacy incident. What? Why would they do that? They're claiming the footage is inconclusive, and that pursuing this could, quote, damage their son's future prospects unnecessarily. They've implied they might take legal action if we proceed. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to understand how my family could go to such lengths to protect Kyle while actively undermining me. The realization that they would jeopardize my career and reputation to shield him from consequences was perhaps the clearest illustration yet of where I stood in the family hierarchy. The following Monday, I was called back to the hospital. Based on the security footage and testimony from several staff members, including Jessica and Melissa Grant herself, who admitted to helping Kyle access the building as a favor, I was fully cleared of any wrongdoing and reinstated. The hospital even issued a formal apology. Kyle, however, faced no consequences beyond being banned from the hospital premises. My parents had made sure of that. After the workplace incident, I thought I'd seen the worst of my family's betrayals. I was wrong. The next revelation came when I attempted to pay my mounting medical bills. My thyroid medication alone cost over $200 per month, and the hospital stay had generated thousands in costs despite my insurance. When I logged into my bank account to transfer funds from my savings, I froze at what I saw. My primary checking account was nearly empty, with just $43.12 remaining of what should have been over $2,000. My savings account showed a balance of $178.56 down from almost $15,000. This can't be right, I whispered to myself, frantically scrolling through recent transactions. Multiple large withdrawals had been made over the past several weeks, $2,500 here, $3,000 there, all while I'd been dealing with my health crisis. Even more alarming were the credit card statements. All three of my cards were maxed out with charges I didn't recognize, mostly from sporting goods stores and athletic training facilities. With shaking hands, I called the bank's fraud department, only to discover something worse than hacking. The withdrawals had been made in person, with proper ID and my signature. The withdrawals from your savings account were made by Patricia Mitchell, the bank representative explained. She's listed as a joint account holder. The joint account had been established years ago to help manage my grandmother's care expenses. After her passing, I'd simply never removed my mother's name, never imagining she would access it without my knowledge. And the checking account? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Those transactions were authorized with your debit card and PIN. Only 3 people knew my PIN. Myself, my mother, from an emergency years ago, and Kyle, who had once watched me enter it when I lent him money for lunch. My credit card statements told the rest of the story. Charges for premium sports equipment, private coaching sessions, athletic wear, and a training camp in Colorado, all clearly for Kyle's benefit. I drove to my parents' house, financial statements in hand, determined to confront them directly. When I arrived, A gleaming new SUV sat in the driveway, a vehicle I'd never seen before. Mom answered the door with a plastic smile. Samantha, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, I said, stepping past her into the house. Where's Dad? And Kyle? We need to talk. Dad was in the living room watching golf. Kyle, it turned out, was out test driving his brand new car, the second new vehicle purchase in a month. I placed the bank statements on the coffee table. Would either of you like to explain why my accounts have been emptied and my credit cards maxed out? Mom and Dad exchanged glances before Dad sighed heavily. We were going to discuss this with you, Samantha. It's a temporary situation. Temporary? I repeated. You stole thousands of dollars from me. We didn't steal anything, Mom insisted. I'm on that account too, remember? And as for the other accounts, we were going to pay it all back once Kyle gets signed. When Kyle gets signed, I echoed. So you took my money I need for medical expenses to fund Kyle's sports fantasy? Dad's face hardened. It's not a fantasy. He's been scouted by semi-professional teams. This is an investment in the family's future. My future includes not being able to pay for the medication keeping my heart functioning properly, I countered. Did either of you consider that? Don't be so dramatic, Mom said. Your insurance covers most of it, doesn't it? And it's not like you're completely broke, you're still working. I was suspended because Kyle stole my badge and medication. That was a misunderstanding, Dad insisted. And you got your job back, didn't you? So no harm done. The casual dismissal of the harm they'd caused was staggering, but there was more. There's something else you should know, Mom said, her tone suddenly cautious. We needed some additional funds for Kyle's training program, and since your accounts were, well, there was only so much there. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. What did you do? We took out a small loan against your grandmother's house, the house I had inherited, the house I maintained and paid taxes on, though I'd allowed my parents to continue living there out of respect for family history. You remortgaged my house without my permission? The betrayal was so enormous I could barely form the words. That's fraud. That's a criminal offense. We signed your name, but it wasn't forgery, Dad explained, as if that made it better. We've been signing for you since you were a teenager. Remember all those school permission slips? I was speechless, trying to process not just the financial theft, but the breathtaking entitlement behind it. At that moment, Kyle walked in, twirling a set of car keys around his finger. He stopped when he saw me, his expression shifting from surprise to defiance. Nice car, I said flatly. I guess I paid for it. Kyle shrugged. Look, it's not personal. The team expects a certain image, and I can't show up driving some beater. This is about my career, my money, my credit, my house, all taken without my knowledge or consent. How is that not personal? It's about family priorities, Mom interjected. Kyle is on the verge of something big. These opportunities don't come twice. And my health? My financial security? Where do those rank in the family priorities? Dad spread his hands. You've always been self-sufficient, Samantha. You have a stable career. Kyle is still building his future. He's 27 years old, I exclaimed. When is he going to be responsible for his own future? The conversation deteriorated from there. My parents justified their actions as necessary sacrifices for Kyle's career. Kyle showed zero remorse, insisting that once he made it, everyone would benefit. When I mentioned consulting a lawyer about the fraudulent loan and identity theft, my parents issued a clear threat. If you pursue this legally, you're no longer part of this family, Dad said, his voice cold. Think carefully about whether you want to throw away your family over money. I almost caved then, years of conditioning to prioritize family harmony, to sacrifice for Kyle, nearly won out. But then I remembered my grandmother's last words to me. Don't let them dim your light, Samantha. I'll think about it, I said, gathering my statements. But in the meantime, I want my house keys back, and I expect itemized accounting of every dollar taken from my accounts. As I drove away, I called my friend Rachel, who happened to be an attorney specializing in financial fraud. The family I was born into might be willing to sacrifice my well-being for Kyle's convenience, but I was beginning to realize that family could also be chosen, and my chosen family, friends like Rachel, Jessica, and Bethany, had proven more loyal than blood. The stress of the financial betrayal took an immediate toll on my already fragile health. 2 days after confronting my parents, I collapsed in my bathroom, my heart racing so fast it felt like it might explode from my chest. My neighbor, alerted by the sound of me falling, called 911. In the emergency room, Dr. Patel looked grim as he reviewed my tests. "Your thyroid levels have spiked dangerously," he explained. "The medication isn't controlling the condition effectively, possibly due to elevated stress hormones interfering with treatment." "What does that mean?" I asked, still groggy from the antiarrhythmic drugs they'd administered. "It means we need to consider more aggressive intervention. At this point, I'm recommending surgery to remove part of your thyroid gland. It's not without risks, but continuing as we are could lead to thyroid storm, which can be fatal." Surgery. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications: medical leave I couldn't afford, recovery time, more bills, and the terrifying prospect of a procedure affecting my throat so close to vital structures. "How soon?" I managed to ask. "As soon as possible. I'd like to schedule for this week." In a moment of weakness, or perhaps hope, I called my mother. Despite everything, some part of me still wanted my family's support, facing a major surgery. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice small. "I'm in the hospital again. They're saying I need thyroid surgery." There was a pause before she responded. "Oh, Samantha, is it really necessary? Surgery sounds so extreme. The doctor says it is." "Well, when are they thinking of doing it?" "This week, if possible." Another pause. "This week might be difficult. Kyle has a tournament in Denver, and your father and I were planning to go support him." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "Mom, this is potentially life-saving surgery. I understand that, but surely they can schedule it for next week instead. We've already bought the plane tickets." Something inside me broke at her response, but I gathered myself enough to say, "I'll let you know the details once they're finalized," before hanging up. The surgery was scheduled for Thursday morning. Dr. Patel explained the procedure, the risks, and the recovery process. I would need someone to drive me home afterward and stay with me for at least 48 hours. Bethany immediately volunteered, rearranging her work schedule to accommodate my needs. Jessica organized a meal train among the hospital staff to ensure I'd have proper nutrition during recovery. The night before surgery, my mother called unexpectedly. "Samantha, I've been thinking about your surgery, and I've decided I should be there. Family should be present for these things." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot. I'll come by the hospital tomorrow around noon. There are some papers we need to discuss as well." "Papers?" I asked, confused. "What papers?" "Just some documents regarding the house loan situation. Nothing to worry about now. Focus on your surgery, and we'll talk afterward." The morning of the surgery, I was prepped and ready, Bethany by my side in pre-op. As they were about to wheel me into the operating room, my mother appeared, looking harried but determined. "There you are," she said, approaching the gurney. "I was worried I'd miss you." Bethany excused herself to give us privacy, though her expression suggested she was reluctant to leave me alone with my mother. "I thought you weren't coming until noon," I said. "I wanted to catch you before the surgery," Mom replied. She glanced around, then reached into her purse, pulling out a folder. "I brought those papers I mentioned." I stared at her in disbelief. "Now? I'm literally about to go into surgery." "It will just take a minute," she insisted, opening the folder. "These documents will transfer the house into Kyle's name temporarily. It's just a formality to secure the additional training funds he needs. Once he's signed, we'll transfer everything back to you." The sixth betrayal, my mother arriving not to support me through surgery, but to have me sign away my property while vulnerable, was perhaps the cruelest yet. "You want me to sign over my house to Kyle? Right now?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. It's for the family, Samantha. Kyle needs. Get out, I whispered. What? Get out, my voice rose, causing a nurse to look over in concern. I'm about to have surgery that I might not wake up from, and you're here trying to get me to sign away my house to Kyle? Get out of this room right now. Mom's face hardened. You're being selfish, Samantha. Think of your brother's future. Miss Mitchell, my anesthesiologist, Dr. Williams, stepped in. We need to proceed with the surgery. I'll have to ask you to leave now. Mom gathered her papers, her expression cold. We'll discuss this when you're thinking more clearly, she said before turning to leave. I went into surgery with tears streaming down my face, feeling more alone than I ever had before. When I woke hours later, groggy and in pain, the first face I saw wasn't my mother's but Jessica's. She had come during her break to check on me. Your surgery went well, she assured me, holding my hand. Dr. Patel says the procedure was successful. I tried to speak, but my throat was too sore from the intubation and the surgery itself. Don't try to talk yet, Jessica said gently. Your family hasn't been by, but Bethany will be here at 5 to take you home. As I recovered in the hospital room, waiting for discharge, I scrolled through my phone to find multiple texts from friends checking in, but nothing from my parents or Kyle. When I checked social media, I discovered why. Kyle had posted photos from his tournament in Denver, my parents prominently featured in the stands, cheering him on. The day after surgery, still weak and struggling to speak, I received a call from Bethany. Sam, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice unusually hesitant. Kyle's been telling people you're having mental health issues. He said your thyroid condition is psychosomatic and that you've been making up symptoms for attention. What? My voice was barely a whisper, my throat raw from the surgery. He's posted on social media about it. I didn't want to tell you right away, but people are reaching out to me asking if you're okay, mentally. The realization that Kyle was actively working to discredit me, to paint me as mentally unstable rather than physically ill, hit harder than any physical pain from the surgery. It was calculated damage control. If people believed I was unstable, they'd be less likely to believe my accusations about the financial theft and identity fraud. That night, lying in bed with ice on my swollen neck, pain medication barely taking the edge off my discomfort, I reached rock bottom. The family I was born into had not only abandoned me in my moment of greatest need, but actively worked to harm me, my health, my finances, my reputation, my career. The pattern was undeniable, the intent clear. I would always be sacrificed for Kyle's benefit. Yet, in that moment of despair, came clarity. My grandmother had endured similar treatment, her health concerns dismissed, her needs secondary to her husband's. She had suffered in silence, eventually dying from the very condition I was now fighting. I would not follow the same path. Enough, I whispered to my empty apartment. This ends now. It was the turning point, the moment I decided that protecting myself wasn't selfish but necessary. Kyle, my parents, the family dynamic I'd endured for 32 years, none of it was worth my life. I deserved better, and for the first time, I truly believed it. Once I could speak properly again, I called Rachel, my attorney friend. I need your help, I said, my voice still raspy from surgery. I'm ready to fight back. Rachel came to my apartment that afternoon, legal pad in hand. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning. For the next 3 hours, I detailed every betrayal, every manipulation, every theft. Rachel took meticulous notes, occasionally stopping me to ask clarifying questions or request specific dates. This is extensive, she said when I finally finished. Financial fraud, identity theft, mortgage fraud, medical privacy violations, potential harassment. Sam, your family has committed multiple criminal offenses. I know, I said quietly. I just never wanted to see it that way before. We need evidence, Rachel continued, practical as always. Bank statements, credit card records, loan documents, any communications where they admit to taking your money or accessing your medical information, and witnesses people who can corroborate your account of events. The process of gathering evidence became my focus during recovery. I created a detailed timeline of events, collected financial records showing unauthorized transactions, and secured a statement from the hospital regarding Kyle's security badge theft and unauthorized access. My next step was reaching out to people who had witnessed my family's behavior over the years. Uncle Thomas, my father's brother, had distanced himself from the family years ago after a falling out with my father. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I found his contact information and arranged to meet him at a cafe near his home. "I've been waiting for this conversation for a long time," Uncle Thomas said after listening to my story. "Your father did the same thing to me that they're doing to you. Used my credit, borrowed money that was never repaid, expected me to sacrifice for the family good, which always seemed to align with whatever he wanted. Did he ever pay you back?" I asked. Thomas laughed bitterly. "Not a dime. When I finally confronted him, he cut me off completely. Made your mother and Kyle cut contact too." "What about the property?" I asked, referring to a small commercial building our grandfather had left to both brothers. Thomas's expression darkened. "He forged my signature on a quitclaim deed, transferred my half to himself. I could have fought it legally, but," he trailed off, "he was my brother. I didn't want to send him to jail." "I have the same dilemma," I admitted. "I can provide documentation of what he did to me," Thomas offered. "Bank records, the forged deed, everything. It establishes a pattern of behavior." Next, I reached out to Mrs. Turner, my high school English teacher who had witnessed the family dynamic firsthand when she tried to encourage my parents to support my college ambitions. "Your brother was a bully even then," Mrs. Turner recalled when we met. "I remember how he would sabotage your projects, take credit for your work. When I tried to discuss it with your parents, they dismissed it as sibling rivalry. They even suggested I was targeting Kyle unfairly. Kyle's former coach, surprisingly, was also willing to talk. Coach Dawson had been fired after a disagreement with my parents years ago. Your parents approached me about a specialized training program for Kyle," he explained during our phone call. "They said you had agreed to help finance it. When I expressed concerns about Kyle's actual potential and suggested the money might be better spent elsewhere, they complained to the athletic director and got me removed." "Did Kyle have the talent they claimed?" I asked. Coach Dawson paused. "He was good, but not exceptional. Certainly not professional material. I tried to set realistic expectations, but they were determined to see him as the next big star." Perhaps the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Melissa Grant, Kyle's ex-girlfriend from the hospital, reached out to me after losing her job due to her role in the security badge incident. "I want to make things right," she said, when we met at a coffee shop. "Kyle manipulated me. He said you had given him permission to access the medication for you since you were too sick to get it yourself. When I questioned it, he got angry, said I didn't trust him. He used you," I said, understanding the pattern all too well. "He did worse than that," she replied, her voice dropping. "He's the one who filed that anonymous complaint about substance abuse. He told me about it after, laughing about how he was teaching you a lesson for not helping him enough." With Melissa's written statement and the growing file of evidence, I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer to discuss next steps. By this point, I'd documented 1. Financial theft from multiple accounts. 2. Unauthorized credit card usage. 3. Mortgage fraud with forged signatures. 4. HIPAA violations through accessing my medical records. 5. Identity theft. 6. Computer fraud via stolen access credentials. 7. Witness statements establishing a pattern of manipulation and abuse. Rachel reviewed everything carefully. "This is more than enough to pursue both criminal charges and civil recovery," she said. "The question is, what do you want to do with it?" It was the question I'd been avoiding. Despite everything, these people were still my family. The prospect of potentially sending my parents and brother to jail was daunting. "I want my money back," I said finally. "I want my house secured. I want them to understand that they can't treat me this way anymore. But I don't know if I want them in prison. Rachel nodded. We have options. We can approach them with the evidence, offer a settlement agreement that requires full financial restoration without pressing criminal charges. But they need to understand the severity of what they've done, and that you're prepared to pursue all legal remedies if they don't comply. We set a date for a formal meeting at Rachel's office. I sent registered letters to my parents and Kyle, detailing the time and place, stating only that it concerned urgent family financial matters and that legal representation would be present. The stage was set for confrontation. After weeks of gathering evidence and building my case, I was finally ready to stand up for myself in a way I never had before. The thought was terrifying, but also liberating. For the first time in my life, I was fighting back against the toxic family dynamic that had nearly cost me everything, including my life. Rachel's office was deliberately intimidating, all glass, steel, and leather in a downtown high-rise. I arrived early, setting up the evidence folders with Rachel and her paralegal. Each document was meticulously organized, copies made for everyone who would be present. My parents arrived precisely on time, looking confused and slightly annoyed. Kyle slouched in 10 minutes late, wearing athletic clothes as if he'd just come from the gym. "What's this about, Samantha?" Dad demanded as they settled into the conference room chairs. Your message sounded ominous. Is this about the house paperwork? Because we can discuss that as a family without involving outsiders. He glanced dismissively at Rachel. I'm Rachel Goldstein, Miss Mitchell's attorney, Rachel introduced herself, not offering to shake hands. This meeting concerns multiple instances of financial fraud, identity theft, and other legal violations committed against my client. Attorney? Mom's voice rose an octave. Samantha, what is this? This is me finally standing up for myself, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I've compiled evidence of everything you've taken from me, every way you've undermined and betrayed me. Today, we're going to discuss how you're going to make it right. Rachel methodically laid out the evidence, projecting bank statements and loan documents on a screen while explaining each violation and its potential legal consequences. The unauthorized withdrawals from Miss Mitchell's accounts total $17,432, she stated. The fraudulent credit card charges amount to $23,967. The mortgage fraud, involving the property at 1842 Maple Street, constitutes a felony under state law, punishable by up to 7 years imprisonment. My parents' expressions shifted from dismissal to shock as the presentation continued. Kyle, however, became increasingly agitated. This is bullshit, he interrupted, standing abruptly. You've always been jealous of me, Sam, always trying to sabotage my career because you can't stand that Mom and Dad support my dreams. Sit down, Mr. Mitchell, Rachel said firmly. We haven't even addressed your specific violations yet, including the HIPAA breaches and security badge theft, both of which could result in criminal charges. You wouldn't dare, Kyle sneered, looking at me. We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other, I replied. Family doesn't sabotage careers or endanger health. Everything you've done to me contradicts what family should mean. Dad leaned forward, his businessman persona taking over. What exactly do you want, Samantha? Money? Is that what this is about? I want everything that was taken from me returned, I stated clearly. Every dollar plus interest and fees. I want my house secured in my name only. I want written admissions of wrongdoing from each of you. And I want Kyle to confess to the hospital about his security breach and medication theft. And if we refuse? Mom asked, her voice cold. Rachel slid forward a thick folder. Then we proceed with both civil and criminal complaints. The evidence is comprehensive and well documented. Miss Mitchell would likely be awarded damages far exceeding the amounts taken, and there is a very real possibility of incarceration, particularly for the mortgage fraud and identity theft. The room fell silent as my parents exchanged glances. Kyle, however, was not finished. You're bluffing, he said, his face flushed with anger. You won't send your own family to jail. I don't want to, I admitted. That's why I'm offering this compromise. Return what you've taken, make amends, and we can avoid the criminal justice system. This is ridiculous, Kyle snapped, pulling out his phone. I'm recording this harassment. Actually, Rachel interjected, recording this meeting without consent of all parties is illegal in this state. I'd advise against it. Kyle put the phone away, but his expression was calculating. As the meeting continued, my parents gradually shifted from defensive to resigned, eventually agreeing to Rachel's proposed settlement terms. Kyle, however, refused to sign anything, storming out of the room with a final threat. You'll regret this, Sam. Nobody chooses money over family and wins. The eighth betrayal came 3 days later. Jessica called me at home, her voice urgent. Sam, you need to come in. There's a situation with administration. When I arrived at the hospital, I found the HR director, Lisa, and Mark from security waiting in a conference room with Jessica. We've received a concerning audio recording, Lisa began, looking uncomfortable. It appears to be you discussing some sort of extortion scheme involving your family? My stomach dropped. What recording? Mark played the audio file from his laptop. It was clearly from our meeting at Rachel's office, but heavily edited, only my voice and Rachel's cut and spliced to make it sound like we were threatening my family for money. Kyle recorded the meeting secretly, I explained, after listening to the manipulated audio. This has been edited to remove context and their admissions of stealing from me. That's a serious accusation, Lisa said carefully. Jessica spoke up. It's consistent with previous behavior. Remember the security badge incident? Kyle has a pattern of manipulating situations to discredit Sam. Mark nodded slowly. The audio does sound choppy in places, and given the previous incident, I called Rachel immediately, who arrived within the hour with the legal recording of the entire meeting that her office had made with everyone's knowledge. The comparison made the deceptive editing obvious. This is a deliberate attempt to damage Miss Mitchell's professional reputation, Rachel stated firmly. It constitutes defamation and potentially workplace harassment. We'll be adding it to our ongoing legal action against Kyle Mitchell. The hospital administration, having seen the pattern of behavior, fully supported me, but Kyle wasn't finished. Over the next week, he launched a public smear campaign posting edited snippets of our conversation on social media, contacting my friends with fabricated stories about my mental state, even approaching my neighbors with tales of supposed substance abuse issues. What Kyle hadn't anticipated was how many people would stand by me. Jessica shared the security footage of Kyle's badge theft with mutual acquaintances when they asked about his claims. Bethany publicly countered his social media posts with facts about my medical condition and recovery. Even former classmates reached out to express support, many sharing their own stories of Kyle's bullying behavior from years ago. The community response made me realize something important. While I'd been focused on my immediate family, I'd overlooked the larger network of people who knew my character and valued my friendship. As Kyle's campaign faltered in the face of this support, my parents finally stepped in not to defend me, but to damage control their own reputations. This has gone far enough, my father said when he called. We've signed the settlement papers. The money will be transferred back to your accounts, and we're removing Kyle's name from the house deed. Just make this go away before it gets worse. It's not about making it go away, I responded. It's about accountability and changing the way you treat me. We're your parents, Samantha. We don't answer to you. That sentence captured the fundamental problem. They would never see me as their equal, worthy of basic respect and consideration. With that realization, I made my final decision. The settlement will resolve the financial issues, I told him, but our relationship can't continue as it has been. I need time and space away from all of you. I need to heal. You're choosing to abandon your family, he said, his voice hardening. Over money. I'm choosing myself, I corrected him. Over abuse. I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. A temporary measure, perhaps, but a necessary boundary. The legal proceedings continued, with Rachel handling all communication. 3 weeks later, the settlement was fully executed. My accounts replenished, credit card debts paid, house deed restored solely to my name. Kyle was required to write a formal letter to the hospital, acknowledging his security breach and medication theft. It wasn't a perfect ending. Money couldn't repair the emotional damage or restore my complete health. But for the first time in my life, I had stood up to the toxic family dynamic that had nearly destroyed me, and I had won not just the legal battle, but something far more valuable, my independence and self-worth. 1 year after the confrontation in Rachel's office, I stood in the sunny waiting room of my new medical practice. The sign on the door read Mitchell Thyroid and Wellness Clinic, specializing in the very condition that had nearly taken my life and that had ultimately set me free. The journey to this moment had been anything but easy. The financial restitution from my family had provided the capital to start the practice, but the emotional healing had been harder work. "The new patient forms look great," Jessica said, joining me at the reception desk. After everything we'd been through together at Memorial Hospital, she'd been the first to join my new practice as head nurse. "Thanks for pushing me to add the family history section," I said. "It's so important for conditions like these." "Patients need to be heard," she agreed, "especially when their families might not be listening." My thyroid condition had stabilized with ongoing treatment. The partial thyroidectomy had been successful, though I would need medication for life. My energy had returned, and the heart palpitations were now rare. I'd learned to recognize the early warning signs of stress affecting my condition and developed healthy coping mechanisms. Therapy had been essential to my recovery, not just physically but emotionally. Dr. Levine had helped me process the lifetime of manipulation and conditional love, the complicated grief of losing my family by choice, and the guilt that still occasionally surfaced. Family estrangement isn't failure. She had reminded me during one particularly difficult session. Sometimes it's the healthiest choice you can make. I had channeled my experience into both my medical practice and volunteer work, leading a support group for patients dealing with chronic conditions while navigating difficult family dynamics. The group had grown from 3 participants to over 20, creating a community of understanding I wished I'd had during my darkest days. My apartment had been sold, too many painful memories lingering in those walls. My new home was smaller but filled with piece artwork I'd chosen, furniture that reflected my taste rather than hand-me-downs, plants thriving under my care. Financial security felt strange after years of struggle. With my accounts restored and the practice growing steadily, I no longer lived with the constant anxiety about money that had shadowed me for so long. I'd even established a scholarship fund for nursing students, named after my grandmother. My chosen family had expanded beyond Jessica and Bethany. Rachel had become a close friend after our professional relationship concluded. Uncle Thomas was now a regular part of my life, our shared experience of family betrayal, creating a bond that felt more like true family than anything I'd known with my parents and Kyle. The unexpected letter had arrived 3 months ago, postmarked from a small town in another state, Kyle's handwriting on the envelope. I'd let it sit unopened for weeks, unsure whether reading it would unravel my hard-won peace. When I finally opened it, the contents surprised me. "I'm in a program," he'd written, "working on myself. They say making amends is part of recovery, but I know sorry doesn't begin to cover what I did to you. I don't expect forgiveness or even a response. Just wanted you to know that I see it now, how they pitted us against each other, how I became the person they wanted at the expense of being a decent brother to you. Anyway, I'm staying away from sports for now, found a job coaching kids, trying to be better." I never responded directly to the letter, but I did something else. I sent a card to the return address with information about family systems therapy and a gift certificate for 3 sessions. No note, no name, just the resources. Whether he used them or not was his choice. As for my parents, our last contact had been through lawyers. They had complied with the settlement, but maintained that I had betrayed the family, not the other way around. Some wounds, I had learned, never heal because the people who inflicted them never acknowledge the damage done. The bell above the clinic door chimed, bringing me back to the present moment. My first patient of the day, a young woman looking nervous, clutching her medical records. Welcome to Mitchell Thyroid and Wellness, I greeted her warmly. I'm Dr. Mitchell. My family doctor said it's probably nothing, she said hesitantly. They think I'm overreacting about my symptoms. But my grandmother had thyroid issues, and I just have this feeling. I believe you, I said simply, gesturing for her to come back to my office. Let's talk about those symptoms and get you the care you need. The hardest lesson I'd learned through everything was this. Sometimes love means walking away. Sometimes healing requires distance. And sometimes the strongest family ties aren't made of blood, but of respect, care, and mutual support. I had lost my family of origin, but in the process, I had found my worth and built a life that honored it. That was a trade I would make again and again. What's your experience with family dynamics? Have you ever had to choose between your own well-being and family expectations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Your support means everything. Remember that choosing your health and happiness isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and I wish you strength on your own path to healing.